You have a death wish.
An Australian dream trip turns into terror.
Nobody noticed that there were 2 Americans missing.
Are 2 divers lost?
All you can see is these sharks circling.
Or is there a deeper secret?
There were things that just didn't stack up.
There is some grave doubts as to what might have happened down there.
Detectives down under risk their lives to solve a bizarre mystery.
There was always a threat of crocodiles.
They're an ambush predator.
Will the truth surface?
The discovery was just a bombshell.
White beaches, crystal waters. The Great Barrier Reef off Australia's eastern coast is one of the world's premier travel destinations. It may have the greatest scuba diving on the planet.
You just have to go out to the Great Barrier Reef. You have to see it all the different coral and fish. It's just the serenity out there. It's just beautiful. You just lose yourself down there.
But there's a dark side to this paradise. And on January 25th, 1998, it became a descent into sheer terror. "3:15 p.m. A scuba tour boat pulls anchor at St. Crispin Reef. It makes the 40-mile journey back to Port Douglas. Everyone thinks it's been a perfect day of diving. It's not until 48 hours later that a crew member makes a chilling discovery. 2 pairs of shoes and 2 divers' bags left on board. Inside, there's ID and hotel information for Tom and Eileen Lonergan of Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
The dive company rang me up and asked me if I'd seen the Lonergans, and we hadn't. So got their passports out of the safe and went around the hostel just asking people have seen them, and no one had.
My cell phone rang. It was my mom, and I could tell that she was distressed. And she told me that Eileen and Tom were missing.
Family members tell police that Eileen, age 28, and Tom, 33, just finished working 3 years as volunteer school teachers for the Peace Corps in Fiji. Before returning to the U.S., the couple was taking their dream vacation, a tour of the world's best scuba sites, starting in Port Douglas, Australia. Eileen wrote in her diary,
"What we've seen will be hard to top. The diving trips are highlights of our lives."
Now, 3 weeks into their vacation, Tom and Eileen went diving with a tour aboard the Outer Edge and vanished. Detectives raced to the marina to question the boat's 5 crew members.
We received a lot of conflicting versions at the time of what had actually happened.
Police learned that the group dove 3 times that day. On the first 2 dives, Tom and Eileen were the last divers to come up from the water.
On each occasion, Thomas and Eileen dived beyond the dive profiles, the designated dive times.
As they interview other passengers, police discover that one tourist shot home video on board. These haunting images of Eileen and Tom were taken just before they vanished. The last time anyone saw the couple was 30 feet below the surface, just 20 minutes before the Outer Edge prepared to go home.
Some of the dive masters say there was a head count, some of the dive masters say there wasn't a head count, but for certain, they never signed in.
Someone completing that dive master's log should have noticed we don't have entries here for Thomas and Eileen. We've got no entries here at all for how long they were diving. Nobody picked up on that.
hardly ever been heard of, where people have actually gone out on a dive boat and were unaccounted for at the end of the trip.
Detectives now fear the unthinkable. The couple may have been left behind in the middle of the ocean. Close to shore, the sea may seem tranquil, even comforting. But 40 miles out, it's a hostile environment where dehydration sets in quickly.
The longer they're exposed to the elements and these tropical conditions, the less their chance is of survival.
Police doubt anyone could live more than about 4 days in open water. The Lonergans have already been missing more than 2. But there's some hope. The crew tells police that unlike everyone else, Tom and Eileen wore heavy long-sleeve dive suits, hoods, and even gloves. The extra clothing could protect them from hypothermia and the blistering sun. But not against the ocean's most dangerous predators.
The ones which are termed man-eating shark will include grey reef, tiger and bull. Any bit of flesh out there is eaten up by something. Nothing will go to waste. They pick everything out because that's what they do.
We hold extreme fears for their safety.
The American couple was dropped off on the outer Great Barrier Reef on Sunday.
The possibility they were left at sea has made headlines around the world.
They weren't even reported missing for 2 whole days.
It's absolutely critical that the search starts as soon as possible.
But just as police are about to launch a rescue mission, a tropical windstorm breaks on the horizon.
The storms in the area precluded us from flying. It was one of those nights where nobody flies. Jets, everybody just bunkers down until the storm passes.
The search for the couple must wait until dawn. If Tom and Eileen are lost at sea with a storm bearing down, what could be going through their minds?
Especially at night, you're going to get more scared. And with 2 people playing off each other, you can get into a real panic tunnel and it would be quite terrifying.
In a race against time, rescuers will risk their lives to find the missing couple.
We're praying for the people who are searching for them. They're in danger also.
But what investigators find is not what anyone expected.
It's now 2 days since Thomas Lonergan and his wife Elaine were left for dead.
No one saw the Lonergans get out of the water. No one apparently noticed they weren't on the boat.
It wasn't until last night the operators raised the alarm.
Very quickly the person will get weak and tired and get delirious. They'll also be suffering dehydration. On top of that, they're in salt water, so they're going to get very, very thirsty.
Given the length of time prior to the search beginning, it's imperative that you get as many resources out there as quickly as you can to instigate a search that should have been started 50 hours beforehand.
With the storm cleared, dozens of rescue teams will scour 3,000 square miles of reef and rocky coast. By now, the current could have carried the couple to shore, or even further out to sea.
There's a vessel showing up here on the radar. It's there, 11 o'clock. Got it?
It's just driftwood.
All righto.
It's very, very difficult to conduct sea searches.
You know where the people were.
The area that needed to be searched was vast.
They're somewhere within that patch of water and you're basically chasing that patch of water around the ocean.
Every hour, depending on tides and seas and currents, the search area gets bigger and bigger.
Tom and Eileen were last seen while scuba diving at Fish City, 43 miles from Port Douglas.
We went out at first light, and then we start doing a square search where we start at the datum point or the search start point, and we just come out every half mile and we just come around in a bigger square. We can plan all that into the flight management systems in the aircraft, and the aircraft flies it automatically, so all our eyes are outside looking at what's going on underneath us.
Dozens of volunteers join the search.
Local charter vessels and fishing vessels, trawlers, anyone that would have been in a position to help at sea at that time. I found a great deal of support from the commercial and private boating industries to assist with all kinds of searching.
Below the surface, Australian Navy divers conduct their own search at Fish City.
They're basically looking for any evidence around the dive site, anything that would have had on their person at the time, anything to indicate the two missing people.
Rescuers search 12 hours with no trace of the couple.
Where we have been searching all day and you're not found, the sheer fact that all the search aircraft, all the search helicopters have missed you in the water or not seen you, the outcome is not good.
Back here in Baton Rouge, the couple's family says all they can do is pray for everyone involved. We're praying for a miracle for them.
It was a very helpless feeling, being on the other side of the world and not being able to physically participate in the search. Your mind can create dozens of different potential scenarios, and you want to believe in one of them. But after a certain amount of time has passed, and all of the avenues have been explored, and all of the boats that were in the area have been interviewed, and then that possibility goes away.
No one finds a single lead. After searching 3 days, rescuers finally call off the search.
It was actually quite frustrating to pour all those massive resources into that huge search area and come up with nothing.
There was no more that we could do, and at that point I was basically looking for evidence of what might have been left of Thomas and Eileen rather than actively searching for survivors.
People couldn't believe this could actually happen. That was the feeling in the dive industry is, I can't believe this has happened.
But just as the public thinks the Lonergans drowned or were killed by sharks, police reveal a stunning discovery.
Oh, well, it was a major revelation. There was no doubt about that.
Thomas had a death wish.
There is some grave doubts as to what might have happened down there.
He believed that they should both die together.
And there's just been a late development on that story. Police have just released a statement which says they have found in the belongings of the Lonergans evidence of, quote, trauma in their personal lives, unquote.
This is the safe that we keep all the valuables and everything in, and when the police came they got the Lonergans valuables and traveller's checks and cash and that.
When police search the couple's room, they find something that blindsides the investigation.
And this is the Lonergans friend, the honeymoon.
A diary.
This is from Eileen Lonergan's diary. On the 9th of January 1998, she wrote, Tom explained to me in great detail
why he feels his life is over and he is ready to die. He hopes to die a quick, fairly painless death. So now I hold in my hands a very uncertain future indeed. Tom's not suicidal, but he has a death wish that could unconsciously lead him to what he desires, and I could get caught up in that.
Was the couple's disappearance really an accident? Or did Tom kill Eileen and and then himself.
He believed that they should both die together, and she certainly wasn't understandably receptive to that idea.
Her response in her diary was that she had no intention of dying, that she loved life, and that she'd sooner be lonely and alive than dead.
Tom Lonergan now becomes a murder suspect.
The picture that emerges is of a troubled man, particularly a troubled man worried that he had to return to the United States and whether he'd be a success there. He felt things were closing in on him.
Mostly, he's afraid. He's afraid of the emptiness that faces him regarding jobs and career. He feels he has no particular skills, talents, or desires, and has only a sense of confusion over what to do.
Yet Eileen's family says that the diary shows her concern for Tom, not fear of murder or suicide.
I think that Eileen was getting concerned that Tom was being a little careless because he was overconfident when he dove. And she was worried that an accident might occur and she might get caught in trying to save him. If she had felt any kind of a threat from Tom, she would have simply walked away.
But the more detectives investigate Tom and Eileen's last day of diving, the more suspicious they become.
There were things that just didn't stack up in my mind.
Investigators discover that a fishing boat was anchored at St. Crispin Reef long after the Outer Edge returned to port.
It was just absolutely perfect conditions. We swam all day, no run, no current. Had a few beers and we kicked on to singing and laughing, and well, we had our lights on till midnight.
If the fishing boat was lit and the water was calm, why didn't the couple swim to it for help? And why didn't the Lonergans hear their own boat, the Outer Edge, as it left the dive site?
It's almost inconceivable they didn't hear the boat idling.
When the engine starts underwater, you can hear it for quite a long distance. You can't miss it. Like, you can feel it sometimes even vibrating if you're close enough.
Detectives now begin to wonder if Tom and Eileen planned to stay in the water.
The crew members told me at the time their eyebrows went up when they saw how heavily protected they were. I mean, they were wearing 5mm thick wetsuits, gloves, even diving hoods. We're talking the tropics here. It's not cold water by any means.
If Tom or Eileen did die at sea, detectives believe there's only one way to prove it. Investigators must find their bodies or their scuba gear. But the search for evidence poses its own dangers.
There was always a threat of crocodiles.
They're an ambush predator, so they lie in wait for prey to come down to the water.
You can have a 15-foot crocodile sitting in knee-deep water and you won't know it's there.
No one has come up with an answer to the question, how could the Lonergans go missing at sea without anybody noticing?
We had media from all over the world arrive in Port Douglas wanting interviews. The calls were just incessant.
But so far, police have no answers.
We were under pressure and results are expected.
Detectives think if some of Tom and Eileen Lonergan's scuba gear washes up on shore, they may be able to solve the mystery. On their search list, tanks, vests, dive hoods, a camera, and an underwater writing slate.
We were hoping there would be some indication as to what happened to them, forensically speaking.
Police believe ocean currents may have carried debris to the region's northern beaches. They start their search 25 miles north of where the couple was last seen alive.
As the current draws northwards along the coast, any beaches that are sort of tilted a bit outwards will catch stuff. So the drift is always going to be northwards and things will blow toward shore.
Along the scorching coast, creeks and streams dump into the ocean. These waterways conceal one of the region's deadliest inhabitants, crocodiles.
They live in the river systems because it's murky, muddy water, which assists in their predation on other animals. They sit in the water, minimal exposure, and they wait for the animals to come to them. They're designed for an ambush attack.
To face this lethal landscape, police call an elite SWAT unit, the Special Emergency Response Team, known as CERT.
We didn't have a narrowed down search area of where we thought anything might wash up onto the beach, so it was basically a matter of searching everything.
Search coordinator Daryl Posgate guides the crew to their hunting ground.
We had such a small boat to search with. Making beach landings was quite difficult at times.
We're getting a bit closer there. How are we going on those rocks there, Steven?
The result, if the timing's not quite right, means that the outboard gets swamped with water and the vessel can sink.
You right there, boys?
Fine.
Okay, right there, Rob. Thanks, mate.
On shore, the CERT team scours the treacherous terrain for evidence of Tom and Eileen. One misstep can be fatal.
There was always a threat of crocodiles in the creeks that we were crossing.
They're an ambush predator. They strike and pull their prey into the water.
In a murky, muddy pond, you will basically see nothing. As you walk around, you send vibrations to the ground, and they know where you are all the time.
They lie in wait for a prey to come down to the water.
There were some creeks and rivers probably 20 metres wide that we could walk across.
Big crocs can hold their breath for hours. If you've got lily pads and that on the top of the water, you just don't see them. You can have a 15-foot crocodile sitting in knee-deep water, and you won't know it's there. They sit there and they wait.
It was a matter of leaving one person standing on the side of the river with a firearm while someone else walked through and crossed the creek crossing, and then we'd turn around and do the same for the other person.
The pressure on investigators builds with each passing hour.
We had constant satellite phone calls from management on whether or not anything had been located.
It was rather frustrating. I didn't hold out much hope of finding anything.
Then, just when the search seems useless, the CERT team makes a discovery: an underwater camera.
Once one camera was found, you know, you felt a bit better about walking out there. And when you match it up with the fact that they were supposed to have had an underwater camera, it made it a bit more exciting then.
But the camera is not the Lonergans. Investigators search 3 more days and come up empty.
It was starting to become disheartening knowing that we're putting in so much effort for no result.
Finally, the team finds a clue, and it could crack the case.
The CERT fellas, when they were walking the beach,
they were in the sands just on the high tide mark,
looking in the waters in case anything was floating and hadn't quite made it to the beach.
As one of them stepped on it, it's flicked it up and caught his eyes.
He finds a black scuba diving hood, but it's what's inside the hood that reveals a chilling clue.
It's like something out of a movie to actually find something with someone's name in it. Was quite a surprise.
We got something on the page.
The name reads E. Lonergan. Eileen Lonergan's hood.
Once you've found one piece, you can narrow the search area down, and the hope is that you will find more.
Now we actually had an area where we could search and maybe hopefully find something and maybe get an answer to what had actually happened.
Then, searchers discover something else on the tide line, a scuba vest.
It was visible from the surface as the waves washed over to take a bit of sand off, sticking out near where the dive hood was found.
The vest, too, has Eileen's name neatly written on it.
I felt a sense of relief, almost a sense of justification that we had been searching in the right area. But having said that, there are probably more questions rather than answers.
The vest was found unbuckled. That means it was taken off on purpose.
The question arises, why would they take their buoyancy vests off?
And something else about the vest doesn't seem right.
The vest that we found was in good condition, not the sort of condition you'd expect if it was out at sea for that length of time.
The lab finds something unusual about Eileen's gear. There are no cuts or marks.
How does that get ashore without being damaged in any way? For all this equipment to navigate its way through all of these coral reefs, and believe you me, coral sharp, I mean, yes, it can happen, but just yet another thing that makes the eyebrows go up.
With no damage to the vest, police wonder if someone deliberately left the gear on shore. But why? A strange story of a man from Tom and Eileen's hometown makes detectives think twice. More than a decade earlier, police arrested American Milton Harris for faking his death down under.
He jumped off the inter-island ferry between the South Island and North Island of New Zealand, and sometime later was discovered in New Zealand.
His family cashed in on nearly $1 million insurance money. And there's a connection to the Lonergan's families.
All are from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, were members of the same church, and all served in the Peace Corps.
I don't know when he was a member of St. Aloysius Parish, or even if we've ever met him.
Police must now determine if Tom or Eileen staged their own disappearance. Detectives doubt they could swim 40 miles to the nearest shore or survive the croc-infested coast. But there's another possibility. Near Fish City, where they disappeared, are floating docks called pontoons.
Could they have swum to these locations? I had to look at where they might have gone. There was the Quicksilver pontoon. That was about 2.8 nautical miles away. There's really quite a substantial pontoon called Agincourt 2. It's about 4.8 nautical miles away.
From the site where they went missing to the pontoon is a swimmable distance. Okay, especially when you're wearing a pair of fins.
If one or both the Lonergans made it to a pontoon, they could have sneaked onto a boat back to the mainland. Detectives question local skippers, and one of them offers a startling new lead. He recalls taking a tour group to the same site where the Lonergans disappeared, but his group was there the day after Tom and Eileen vanished.
He'd taken a party exclusively made up of Italians out to the Agincourt Reef pontoon.
On the way back to Port Douglas, the crew did a head count, and they had more divers returning than they took out.
He claimed that on the way back, he heard American voices among all the Italians.
It's possible that they hid in the infrastructure underneath the pontoon and travelled back to Port Douglas among the Italian tourists the next day.
Police now have to wonder if Tom or Eileen planned their disappearance all along. Could they have deliberately worn extra heavy scuba gear because they knew they were going to be in the ocean overnight?
It was curious that they would have taken such equipment into water like that. Diving experts have testified that someone wearing a wetsuit that long could have survived for up to 7 days.
The whole of North Queensland was rampant with rumours about what might have happened.
There's a claim the Lonergans could have been picked up by another vessel.
There is a very good possibility that they've now escaped into Australia.
While all sorts of theories and wild guesses are being expressed.
And may have even left Australia.
They're in every newspaper in the land, on every TV bulletin. Their faces were widely recognised.
As word spreads, police get another break. The owner of a Port Douglas bookstore claims she saw the couple in her shop 2 days after they disappeared. And she's not the only one.
All manner of rumours and speculation, even alleged sightings of the couple, have followed in the wake of their bizarre disappearance.
One person claimed to have seen them in the streets of a North Queensland town, had looked at them closely, had gone into a newsagent, bought a newspaper to check against the photos that were appearing in the newspaper that day. She was actually convinced that they were the Lonigans.
From Brisbane all the way to the upper tip of Australia, witnesses bombard police with claims they've seen Tom and Eileen alive.
At the time, there was actually an American tourist who was driving throughout Queensland, and we must have got 20 reports about him saying that he was one of the missing persons, because he did have actually quite a resemblance to Thomas Lonergan.
Detectives check out every lead, but after 2 more months, they're no closer to finding the missing couple.
None of the sightings were credible. They were obviously mostly well-intentioned, but there were no credible sightings of Thomas and Eileen.
The rumor mill wants to say that you've gone off and started a new life, you know, and doing what? You know, they were in the Peace Corps for 3 years. They were getting ready to start a new life. I mean, there's literally nothing that they were running from.
For the Lonigans, it was impossible to stage a disappearance. Under normal circumstances, someone would come looking for them if they didn't return to the boat.
And it's not likely they did it for money. The Lonergans have only $30,000 in life insurance and little in savings.
Eileen had a couple of investments that amounted to maybe $5,000, and all of us signed it over to Tom's family because they had, you know, Tom's younger sister who's disabled needed the support.
Police and the public are left with a haunting question. If the couple didn't fake their disappearance, what did happen to Tom and Eileen? Then the answer comes literally out of the blue.
There's no doubt the discovery was just a bombshell.
Please help us. We've been left at sea by the outer edge. Please rescue us before we die. Tom and Eileen Lonergan.
"20 miles south of where Eileen Lonergan's scuba gear washed up, fishermen find a desperate plea scrawled on a diver's writing slate. The note is dated 8 a.m., January 26th, the morning after Eileen and Tom went missing. Detectives send the slate to the lab for testing.
There was much speculation about whether someone had planted this thing there, writing on it how they had been left at sea by the outer edge.
If it was his slate and his writing and tells us that they're alive, the next morning they'd survived the night, the long night at sea.
Sea algae growth shows that the slate had been in the water since the time the Lonergans disappeared. And handwriting experts say the grim message was written by Tom.
I saw the slate as what we might call in the police a dying declaration. When I looked coldly and clearly at the facts told me that Thomas and Eileen had been left behind by the outer edge.
Police are convinced there was no murder or faked disappearance.
Their bank accounts haven't been used. They booked a 3-month and paid for a 3-month trip. Thomas had arranged to re-enroll in university. These aren't issues that are consistent with a murder, suicide, or people staging their disappearance. The diary entries were quite prophetic. That doesn't mean to say that what occurred was in any way attached to the diary entries. It doesn't escape the fact that they were left behind by the outer edge.
Detectives believe they finally know what really happened. On the morning of January 25th, the outer edge left at 8:30 a.m. The crew planned to dive 3 dives. As the day progressed, Tom and Eileen fell into a pattern.
On both the first and second dive, they were late returning by 10 or 15 minutes.
Once they came up, the crew did a head count. Then, on the third and last dive, something went terribly wrong.
As to whether a head count was conducted on the final dive of the day, that question remains open. The boat had lost 40 minutes. So perhaps the skipper and crew may have been trying to make up for lost time, or at least to leave the dive site fairly expeditiously.
The skipper was on the deck, looking around, making sure everything was okay. All was in order, the engines were started and the boat idle. The crew thought they had 26 people on board, but of course, Tom and Eileen Lonergan were still in the water. On the return journey to Port Douglas, nobody noticed that there were 2 Americans missing.
When Tom and Eileen resurfaced, the boat was gone.
As a professional, I'd probably stay waiting for the boat to come back, because surely to God, they're not going to get all the way to Port Douglas and leave us out there. You could drift off and get into much worse strife.
The dehydrational aspect starts to become relatively serious within a relatively short period of time.
If Tom is predisposed at that point to taking his own life, they may just have taken off their buoyancy vests, which explains why they were subsequently found unharmed, kept their weight belts on and just gone under.
I had to correct him when he said that he hoped we will die soon together, so I would not be left alone. I told him that my philosophy was very different, that I hope to live to be ridiculously old, that I love my life and I'm terrified of death. He said, if you are so afraid of dying, if you love your life, why do you risk diving? It's because I love my life that I dive.
Some experts say Tom and Eileen became exhausted and drowned. But there is one other possibility.
Of all the scenarios, that was the most terrifying.
It's one of the most horrific things that could happen to anyone. It's most of our worst nightmares.
The State District Attorney's Office files manslaughter charges against Outer Edge owner and skipper Jack Nairn. He faces up to 20 years in prison.
He took it upon himself to say, yes, I was the owner of the boat and the skipper, so I should answer for it.
But Eileen's family finds no fault with the captain.
He was driving the boat. He had people that he employed, that he trusted, and they failed him.
The jury agrees. They can't convict one person for an entire crew's mistake. Jack Nairn is found not guilty of manslaughter.
And the skipper's career was ruined. He's had to clamber back from the brink of disaster financially and psychologically.
To To this day, some Australians believe Tom and Eileen are still alive and well, living in hiding.
In denial of what really happened, a lot of people were making up these stories in their own mind, and all these stories blew out of all proportion, and it was only based on the fact that people couldn't believe this could actually happen.
It's a wonderful place, and you don't expect to die in paradise.
Today, with help from the Lonergan's families, the Australian scuba industry is safer. Head counts, name calls, and signature in and out cards are now mandatory. Eileen's family credits the police force's tireless and bold investigation for bringing them some closure.
Really, their shining moment was when they took us out to the reef, and we used a police boat for the funeral, and they loaned my dad and I equipment so that we could go into the water. We put some flowers in the water and put a memento down on the reef. I want to feel that some purpose has come out of their deaths, and I want to be able to hopefully have some part in ensuring that it's not duplicated again.